Have you ever really thought about how far a country's power can reach? I mean, really? In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into how a nation's laws can follow people, companies, and even crimes all across the globe. It's a journey that really defines the limits of a country's authority.
So, let's just think about that for a second. Let's say you're on vacation and you do something illegal. Whose laws apply? Or what if a company in one country causes a massive pollution spill in another? See? The answers are not simple at all, and they all circle back to one huge legal concept.
And that concept is jurisdiction. It's basically the official power a state has to make laws, to judge people by those laws, and, to enforce them. It's the legal rulebook for a country's power. But the million-dollar question is, where does that power actually stop?
All right, so to really get how the rules can be bent, we've got to first understand the main rule, the absolute foundation of it all. And it starts with thinking of a country as its own little bubble of authority.
Okay, the starting point is really simple. This is the principle of territoriality, and it's basically the bedrock of international law. A state's power is supreme inside its own physical borders. It gets to make the rules and enforce them there, and every other country has to respect that, period.
And the flip side is just as crucial. This famous ruling from the Lotus case makes it crystal clear. You can't just barge into another country and start acting like you own the place. Without permission, that sovereignty bubble is, for all intents and purposes, unbreakable.
But of course, the world is a messy, interconnected place, right? Crime, business, people, they don't just stop at the border, so the law can't always stop there either. And this is where we start to see the rules of jurisdiction get a little stretchy.
This brings up some huge questions. What do you do about international terrorism or cybercrime? What if a country wants to prosecute one of its own citizens for a really serious crime they committed halfway around the world? Suddenly, that simple territorial model, it just doesn't cut it. So, international law had to adapt. And this is maybe the most important distinction you need to understand. Think about it like this. You can prescribe a rule for your kid like, hey, no staying out past midnight even when they're at a friend's house. That's prescriptive jurisdiction. But you can't enforce that rule by kicking down your friend's door and dragging your kid home. That's enforcement jurisdiction. And doing that is a huge no-no without permission from the other household or, in our case, the other country.
So here's the bottom line. A country can sometimes make a rule that reaches beyond its borders. That's allowed in certain cases. But actually acting on that rule, making an arrest, seizing assets, that's where that hard line of respecting another country's territory comes roaring right back.
This takes us to an even trickier situation. What happens when a state's power isn't just stretched to cover one person or one event, but it actually extends over an entire foreign territory? Well, the legal standard here is something called effective control. Basically, if a state is the one pulling the strings in an area outside its own borders, militarily, politically, whatever, international law says, hey, you're responsible for what happens there. That includes things like human rights. It's about who's actually in charge, not just what the maps say.
And believe it or not, this isn't just some historical concept. It is very much alive today. Right now, the United Nations officially lists 16 non-self-governing territories around the world. These are places whose people haven't yet achieved full self-government.
And we're talking about some pretty well-known places, like Gibraltar, American Samoa, the Falkland Islands, or Islas Malvinas. Each one of these is a super complex situation where one state is basically running a territory and its people from far, far away.
And with that kind of control comes a massive responsibility. I mean, Article 73 of the UN Charter, one of the core treaties of international law, is incredibly specific about this. It calls this a secret trust. That's powerful language. It means an obligation to put the people who live there first and promote their well-being above everything else.
Okay, so we've looked at power inside a country's borders, and we've seen how it can be stretched beyond them. But what about the places that are beyond any nation's borders, the great frontiers of our planet, and even beyond?
Yeah, I'm talking about the high seas, the enormous mineral-rich deep seabed, Antarctica, and even outer space. These places are what we call the global commons. They don't belong to any one country. So who makes the rules? This incredible challenge led to an amazing legal idea, the common heritage of mankind. It's this powerful principle that says these shared spaces are the collective property of, all of us. They have to be managed for the good of everyone, not just for the powerful nations that have the technology to get there first. And what's so elegant about this is how the name itself tells you everything you need to know. Common means it's shared by all. You can't just slice off a piece for yourself. And heritage, well, that tells you it's an inheritance, something handed down to us that we have to protect for all the generations to come. This quote, it's just a beautiful expression from traditional African land law, but it perfectly captures the spirit of this whole idea. It's this timeless concept that we're really just caretakers of these resources for a family that stretches across time, past, present, and future. So when you step back and look at it, from the absolute power a country has inside its own borders, to a shared responsibility for the entire planet, you realize that jurisdiction is this incredibly dynamic and often fought-over legal map of our world.
Think about the journey we just took. We went from the idea of a nation as this kind of untouchable fortress to the reality of a deeply connected world where that power has to be balanced with big ideas like shared global responsibility.
You can almost see it as a spectrum, right? On one end, you've got absolute control. That's what happens inside your own borders. Then it stretches to cover your citizens or threats abroad. Then it can be imposed, where one state governs another territory. And finally, you have areas of no national control at all, governed by all of humanity. But here's the thing, that map is not finished, not by a long shot. New frontiers, especially cyberspace, are putting huge pressure on all these traditional ideas. I mean, data flows across borders in an instant. An action in one country can cause chaos in another, and that just completely challenges the whole idea of territory and enforcement. And that leaves us with a huge, critical question for our time. As our world gets more and more digital, a place where our actions defy physical borders, where on earth do we draw the new lines of power and responsibility? The answer to that is going to define the future of our shared world.